So we can begin now. Good morning and shalom. On behalf of the Indian Futures, I'm extremely happy and delighted to welcome you all to our international symposium, which is titled Terror Strikes Israel, Implications for National and International Security. Let me also mention here that we are already live streaming this event on our own YouTube channel. And I think before I mean it's an excellent stellar panel which we have managed to assemble as always, and I just want to in fact so we can begin now. Good morning and shalom on behalf of the in fact let me now also share with all of you an address, and in fact a support, which a letter of support which we had in fact shared with the Excellency in the Embassy of Israel, and it really, in fact, began by pointing out that this was really an appalling, dastardly terror attack which we all saw on the 7th of October morning by Hamas. And we, as a think tank, the Indian Futures, have expressed utter shock and disbelief at these brazen attacks on innocent civilians, including women and children of Israel and other nationalities. The sight of innocent elders, women, and kids being taken as hostages are an act of cowardice. We all see that. We unequivocally condemn these acts of terrorism that have no legitimacy and or no justification whatsoever. We express full unqualified solidarity with Israel and its right to defend itself, and which is being increasingly acknowledged by many powers, and bring the perpetrators to justice. India, as a victim of cross-border terrorism for over 2 decades now, fully understands the pain and sufferings of Israel. In fact, the Indian Futures fully endorses our Prime Minister Shri Narendra Modi when he says that people of India stand firmly with Israel in this difficult hour. India strongly and unequivocally condemns terrorism in all its forms and manifestations. In fact, I would like to wish Israel all strength and endurance to survive this critical moment. Even very importantly, it forges a new Middle East of peace and prosperity for the region and beyond. And I'm extremely happy, as I said, to welcome today's speakers. And we have with us, very importantly, Ambassador Naor Gilon, who is going to share with us how Israel is looking at the strikes, what does it mean for Israel, and what are its future sort of trajectory internationally, and what sort of and how does it see India figuring in that calculus. We are also extremely fortunate to have with us Lieutenant General Khandare, who is the principal advisor to the Government of India, Ministry of Defense. Thank you, Lieutenant General, for joining us today morning, despite your extremely busy schedule. We have with us Professor Efraim Inbar. Professor Efraim Inbar, in fact, is the president of Jerusalem Institute for Strategy and Security. And in fact, we are hosting this event with the JISS. Thank you, Professor Inbar, for being extremely kind and generous with your time and with your mentoring us. We have with us also Professor Hillel Frisch, who is also a senior research fellow with the JISS, and Dr. Khushnam PN, in fact, is the head of research with the Indian Futures. Thank you so much. We are extremely happy, in fact, to have Dr. Meena Singh Roy, who is going to, in fact, share the event once we hear the ambassador and have a conversation with all the distinguished speakers. And I really want to thank other participants who have joined here on Zoom. And we have tried to limit the number of participants here to have a smooth and a disruption-free conversation. And but we have many joining us on our YouTube live streaming, where we're streaming now. So with this, I invite Ambassador Naor Gilon to deliver his keynote address. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much, Manish. Thank you for your sympathy, and thank you for PIF and to JISS for organizing this event. I think it's the first one of its kind since the eruption that I am at least aware of here in India, since the eruption of October 7th. With your permission, I'm going to speak more on the strategic side. I don't want to go back into the horrors of that day. But I will say, there are people who are researchers that I hear, former ambassadors, others who are seeing it as another skirmish between Israel and Hamas. I think they don't understand what happened here. This is a watershed event. Israel will not be the same, and I think that the world is not going to be the same afterwards. There will be enough time for Israel to go into understanding where we failed, but it's quite clear that the concept that we built to ourselves, that the basics of this concept failed, and the concept was that Hamas is interested in the well-being of its own population. And then we thought that by dual contamination, dual deterrence, military deterrence, and giving the people better lives, because we allowed in the last few years tens of thousands of Gazans to come into Israel daily, and it gave quite a boost to the economy. So we thought that with containment and improving the economy, Hamas will now be contained, and they are not. They are not thinking in the way we want them to think, or the way we think about our population, about being leaders. They don't care. I mean, at the end of the day, we went to sleep with Hamas as a neighbor, and we woke up with ISIS as a neighbor. That's the bottom line of ideologies here, extreme ideology. The pictures are not going. We were surprised by the pictures, the brutality. But this is ISIS. When the ideology is like that, that's the result of what you get. We on October 7th, I think that Israel started its war on its ability to continue to survive in the Middle East, in the region, because weak Israel, or perception of weak Israel, will not survive in the Middle East. There is no doubt that we have to be perceived as strong. The weak doesn't survive in our region. But it's not only a war on the survivability of Israel, it's also, I think, a bigger war on the stability of the Middle East, or West Asia, as you call it, and maybe even Western countries, because any picture or any feeling that the jihadists here have the upper hand will give a lot of energy. We saw that in the past. The elements of ISIS and extreme elements and jihadist elements are everywhere, but they were beaten very hardly by the Americans and by others, and they are still there and waiting for the thing that will help them regather. And I think the image of Hamas, ISIS winning might risk pragmatic regimes around us in the Middle East. And again, it can be also, we saw what happened last time. It can go back to Europe. We can see the whole thing again. That's why I hope that the world understands that, at least the democratic world, let's call it, and will give us the support, the political support that we need in order to make sure that we neutralize any ability of Hamas to ever in the future execute anything of this magnitude. And this is very, very important. There is no doubt in my eyes that Iran is behind it. I don't know about this specific attack. I think that we were surprised, and our knowledge about the planning will slowly reveal, but everyone knew that for years, Iran is behind the Hamas in the sense of financing, of training, of arming. This is very clear. We saw open meetings in the past, before the attack, between these elements of Hamas, Hezbollah, Islamic Jihad, and Hamas, all these together with the Iran army. And we saw the Iranian foreign minister coming after the eruption to Lebanon, to Beirut, and meeting all these elements and coordinating. We see that Hezbollah, that unlike Hamas, is a flesh of Iran, so there is no difference there. Really part and parcel of if we are going to fight Hezbollah, we are going to fight de facto the Iranian army, one way or another. in ability, in capabilities, and motivation, and everything. So we see what Hezbollah is trying to do in the north. This will be a different ballgame if we have to go to war with Hezbollah. But I believe that Israel, now that we are not surprised, we have the capacity of confronting also multi-fronts. I hope Iran understands that they are going to lose Hamas for sure if they want to lose both their arms now, Hezbollah and Hamas. Their decision, they think that it's a time to get rid of Israel in the Middle East. They will not, but they will lose. At the end of the day, will be pricey also for Israel, but they will find that both their bodies, they were depleted, I think, to a very, very large extent, if Hezbollah chooses to open a front. For the time being, they already opened the front, but they're limiting the opening of the front to the border area and not making it a deeper war, a full war. I'm sure that in the eyes of the Iranians, one of the elements that motivated them to push for this now is that they see that the Middle East is changing and not in their favor. They saw 3 years ago the Abraham Accords. They saw the I2U2 coming into it, India involved. They saw that Saudi Arabia and Israel are getting closer. They saw the IMEC from the G20, the idea to create a corridor, transportation corridor from India to the Mediterranean Sea through Gulf countries, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, and Israel. And I think that they are trying to oppose it. I think that in a way also it demonstrates the new order, world order, because it's elects to understand that this is a game changer. It's not the same thing. I mean, the Americans are not sending their fleet to the region to threaten Iran and Hezbollah every day. This is something very unregular, and the visits, the intensity of the American involvement, the visits, President Biden and everything. So this is there. I think that also in Europe, many understood that it's not another skirmish. It's something totally different. I hope that they are able to stand demonstrations and stuff like that and understand that the bigger picture here is that if we don't defeat Hamas, as I said before, Hamas, ISIS, the extremists in the world are going to raise their head. It's going to be unbearable for all of us. And we are not asking for physical help. We need the legitimacy to do what we know how to do. And the blocks here, Russia, China, you see so far, they didn't say anything serious about this October 7 attack. On the contrary, when Israel is starting to react, and it's only the beginning from the air, they are fast on their feet to ask for, Security Council to speak against us and whatnot. When we come to India, well, you mentioned it in the beginning, and I totally agree. The very strong reaction of the Prime Minister. Twice he spoke about it. The first was in the afternoon. I think before anyone understood the magnitude of what's happening, the afternoon of the Saturday, October 7th, a few hours, seven hours maybe after everything started. And it's very important. Also, the public support here from high-level people, but also the regular public here. It's a huge support to Israel. I always say I've served as a diplomat already, I think, in 6 countries, 6 places, I should say. And nothing is, the wide support to Israel is second to none. There are, of course, other voices, but the vast majority here in India, it's very moving and very important that we have the legitimacy of such a important, big friend, an important player and growing player in the world. What we can do here, I think on the practical level, I think it's about time for designation of Hamas as a terror organization by India. I mean, it's practically what Prime Minister said. Okay, it's not anything that is not there, but I think the formal process, it's a good time to start the formal process. We need any help possible on releasing the hostages. I mean, these 210, we don't know the exact number, more or less, hostages, we don't know how many alive. We have to take them out of the equation. It's unbearable, unacceptable. We have, by the way, with the murdered and the kidnapped are from more than 40 nationals, so different countries, and this is something that we have to make sure that they are released. I think that there is still time to pressure Hezbollah not to go into the game. India, I would guess, should have a stronger incentive also, because Indian forces are in UNIFIL on the border, where everything bad is happening now. So I think I will stop here. These are the elements. I will let Efraim and the other experts to go and speak about Israel's plans, because their guess is as good as mine. It's a guess because no one is revealing. It's clear to everyone that we are going in very strong ground attack, because the targets that were put forward by the Prime Minister cannot be achieved, and this is dismantling of Hamas as ruler in Gaza and releasing the kidnapped. This cannot be done anyhow without it. But as I told you before, also we have to regain our power and deterrence in the Middle East if we want to survive in this region. So I will stop here. Thank you very much for organizing it. I think it's very important, and I wish you a fruitful and strong discussion.
Thank you, Excellency. I think you have really poured out your heart in a sense in terms of what Israel is experiencing right now. And I think there can be no sort of moral confusion about what happened on the morning of October 7th. It is just deplorable. And I think one of the, I think very important points which you made is that how it was so important now to think of neutralizing Hamas. I think that's a very important point. And also looking at how Iran was in fact directly or indirectly backing this entire, these attacks. And I think the last point which remains crucial to Israel's path ahead is about asserting Israel's power and the deterrence. I think these are very important points. Thank you, Excellency. We all understand the very sad and depressing times which the country is facing. But I'm pretty sure we Indians join in the largest possible numbers to support Israel in this hour of need. And we in fact just celebrated 30 years of our diplomatic partnership. So this is going to be a very important moment also for India-Israel ties. So thank you, Excellency, once again. With this, I now request Dr. Meena Singh Roy, who is a distinguished fellow with us with the Indian Futures, and the former chair of the West Asia Center of the MP Manor Parikar IDSA, to now take over as the chair of today's symposium. Over to you, Dr. Roy.
Good morning to all, and thank you so much, Manish, for bringing me as a chair to discuss such an important issue, and I'm so pleased to chair a session with such distinguished panelists. Most of them are known to me, and at this moment, I think we are going through a situation where there are more questions and more uncertainties as we see, and with the hope that we would find at least a better, solutions, or we may be able to manage some issues. Before we start, I give the floor to the panelists. I only want to say a few words for the, explained. I mean, we don't understand, why, these terror attacks are happening. There is no reason for us to believe that, there is no pardon for people, who commit such heinous crime, inflicting violence and on civilian, on old people, on children, on women. Now that is something which is really a disturbing element of this whole crisis which is unfolding. And you see the region which was looking at economic development, which was looking at the order which would have helped not only the region but beyond. And suddenly we are back, all of us are, looking at the crisis which is unfolding, and we don't know what the way ahead is. And I would request all the panelists to focus on at least the title which we have chosen for the conference now here, the discussion that we would be moving in. Terror strikes in Israel, implications for national and international security. The first in our panel is Lieutenant General Vinod Khandare, who has his military background, has the experience, and I'm sure he'll bring some new dimension to the problem as to how the national security issues would come up when we are dealing with such situations. And it is such a complex and old issue when we talk about Arab or Palestinian and Israel conflict. But I think the most important aspect here is to see what are the implications for the region and beyond, how region is reacting to it, and how do we, India and Israel pull together our strength to find, some ways to manage this crisis. And with these words, General Khandare, I invite you to give your viewpoint as you deem appropriate, putting in things in the context. So over to you, General Khandare.
Thank you, Meena. Thank you, Manish. And a very big thank you to the ambassador for having the stage, having set the stage. I agree with most of the things which Manish had brought out, which Meena, you've also highlighted, and the points which the ambassador also brought out. Now, firstly, my condolence to the Israeli nation, because this kind of terrorism, which has mauled the civilian population, is absolutely unacceptable, whether it is in terms of the killings or it is in terms of the hostages. And India has been through such situations, and we've also seen the same problems which Israel has been facing since 1948. So both the countries have something in common here, which is not a pleasant thing to share, but we've seen such issues like hijack, hostages, wars, the violence inflicted by terrorists, the state actors, non-state actors, the blurred line between these two. So it's quite easy for us to feel the sentiment in the nation as well as in the military. But the point here is, what actually surprises many of us is, who benefits from all this? Definitely, there are multiple people who benefit out of this. They may not have been involved in the initiation of this terrorist act, but the geopolitics is also important. Events and incidents will happen, personalities will come and go, but basically what we have to see, what's happening in the region, what's happening in the world. Israel obviously is quite in a receiving end as of now because of the terrorist actions. At the same time, there is a possibility of multi-front military operations also opening up. There are countries who have supported the known names like Turkey, Iran, they are the ones. Israel was going strong in trying to normalize the region, normalize relations, and one must compliment Israel towards that trajectory in terms of whether it was Abraham Accord or various measures that they had been taking with the neighboring countries, and that too in a very troubled neighborhood. Again, they were also opening up many things which the ambassador explained about trying to contain the violence and trying to normalize the relations with people in Gaza, giving them economic opportunities. So I appreciate what was being done. And suddenly this kind of scale and the kind of violence that has happened obviously has put everyone back. 50 years ago, there was an attack on Yom Kippur Day that was by countries, but this time it is by a non-state actor. The gravity is the same, or possibly this time it is much more. So that is something which just cannot be pardoned. The other part is, who benefits out of this? Hamas, definitely yes. Their relevance has got established, especially among those people who were the fence sitters in their own community. So that part, Hamas definitely has benefited. Does Hezbollah benefit? Of course, that also what they were just waiting. And I think they realized that this is an opportunity to join in and take the best out for themselves. So Hezbollah is also one beneficiary. What happens to the others? There is a lot of confusion in the minds of the other neighboring states who think that it is important for them to have peace in this area, but have a dilemma that they cannot be seen as siding with Israel and they need to condemn Israel. So whether they really mean it or whether they are doing a lot of cosmetic show, and that part is a compulsion which we find in our area also. There are people who have to demonstrate the support while internally they may not be wanting to do that. Going beyond that, United States suddenly finds itself in one more place where there is violence. They were already, in a way, involved or stuck in that Ukraine conflict. And now they have another front opening up. So whether the resources are going to be spread, obviously, they're going to be spread. There's a lot of thought process that is going on that whether Ukraine is going to be now sidelined as far as US interests are concerned. Even if we don't believe that Ukraine is going to be sidelined, but US has a challenge of trying to deal with both these fronts. Does Russia benefit from it? The moment US attention gets split between Ukraine and Gaza, Russia definitely gets to benefit. The biggest beneficiary in this, to my mind, is China. China's interest lies more in Taiwan, and the biggest obstacle it finds there is USA. And suddenly you find US resources getting pulled into two other trouble spots. So China does heave a sigh of relief. Whether they are behind this or not, it's too early to say. But China also needs to understand that the US command, Indo-PACOM, is quite a potent force. And if they do try to initiate a conflict there, US will possibly have to take a call on what is its priority of these trouble spots. And I think they definitely will look at Taiwan as more priority, because if Taiwan is gone, more than about 80% of the technology for the world gets lost. So I think US has a dilemma, but they definitely will look at it differently. The US arms industry definitely will benefit from this. This is not a time actually to weigh the pros and cons of benefits or losses. This is a time of serious introspection of what has happened and what is likely to happen. So when I look at very briefly the geopolitics of it, this is how I would look at it. Let me look at the military implications of this. As a military man, I would want to say that there are a number of lessons which have come out. People used to say that the era of conventional wars is over. It is not. Ukraine has proven. The era of short and swift wars, no, it's no more like that. Wars are continuing. What will happen in this particular place? You heard the ambassador saying they have a particular aim, they have an agenda, and that doesn't seem to be in terms of short. It possibly is going to be a prolonged haul. And so militarily, again, the countries have to understand that diplomacy goes as long as military is strong. So one cannot start neglecting on various I would use a very strong word, fraudulent assessments and fraudulent opinions to say that the era of wars is over. Nothing is over. Proxy and conventional both can go hand in hand. Maybe proxy can initiate a conflict, conventional can follow, or it can be both together, or it can be conventional starts and proxy is inserted into the hinterland. So all that is going to definitely pose a challenge to many countries who are living in troubled neighborhoods, and Israel and India both are in troubled neighborhoods, which are not a choice. We have inherited it based on what the world or the global bodies gave it to us, what our colonial masters gave it to us. Specifically, in terms of intelligence, one cannot be complacent. I am not trying to say that Israel was complacent. Maybe the overemphasis on only technological int may have impacted. They need to have, and we also need to have, a balance between technological and human int. Nothing can be excluded. While we carry out threat assessments from our neighborhood, seeing their size or seeing their economics doesn't necessarily mean that they are deprived of technology. You see the kind of missiles that Hezbollah has. You heard the ambassador saying what Hamas has, what Hezbollah has. I'm sure the intelligence that is being made available to them, whether it is from space, whether it is from communication intelligence, there are obviously players who are supporting them. So nothing should be undervalued, so to say. And our threat assessments have to be realistic. At times we are told that these are alarmist figures. Nothing is alarming. And if we try to get into that, we have a problem. One more issue which is related to security of the nation is related to deterrence. It's not purely military deterrence. Whenever a country goes through a weak political regime, that also reduces the deterrence value of a nation in the neighborhood and in the entire globe. I have run out of my time, Meena, and I think I will close here. This is a very difficult thing to finish in 8 or 10 minutes, but we will reserve rest of the things for question and answer. Thank you.
Thank you so much, General Khandare. It is actually, you are very right, such a complex problem cannot be explained in 10 minutes, but thank you so much for bringing in the geopolitical dimension and the military dimension of the problem as such. And I completely agree with you that the era of war is not over. There are threats and challenges in every part of the world, and the assessments have to be based on both the human intelligence and our conventional strength of it. I think I'll reserve my comments for the last, and I would now request Professor Efraim Inbar, who's a very experienced person. I've personally, met him so many times and seen, but I know my condolences, Professor Inbar, to all the Israeli people. And I am standing here supporting all of them. And I hope God gives them strength to go through and bear the losses that they have seen. And I'm sure, it is one phase which will get over, and we look forward for a better future. With this, I request you to give your viewpoints in next 10 to 12 minutes that we haven't given, sub-themes, but I'm sure we will hear the Israeli perspective from you. Over to you, Professor.
Dear Meena, you don't have to be too formal with me. We are old friends, and I'm happy to see, faces of other, friends of mine in India. We received a lot of letters of support from India, and I appreciate very much the supportive mood in your important country. And I will try to emphasize that the war we are now engaged in is maybe the 2023 independence war of Israel. It is, for us, a very important war, because simply we lost deterrence. We are surprised. And we lost tremendous number of people, 1,400 people. You know, we are a very small country. Over 4,000 wounded, over 200 kidnapped people, children, elderly, women, and the magnitude of the beating we took requires a response in order to restore deterrence. As it was mentioned, in our neighborhood, you cannot survive without deterrence. Not only that, to make it perfectly clear, the peace treaties we have with our neighbors, with Jordan, with Egypt, and of course the Abraham Accords, are predicated upon the perception that Israel is a strong country and can be relied on, particularly against the aggressive schemes of Iran that most of our Arab friends are feeling. Therefore, this is something which is very important. I think a clear lesson we learned is that our internal debates, which we've been through since January, have eroded our deterrence. I must say that JISS, the Jerusalem Institute for Strategy and Security, issued a warning in June about the possibility of an impending war, because we read the Arab and Iranian press. It was quite clearly that they believe that we are weak. This is a famous theory that Israel will disintegrate because of the internal tensions. And nowadays we have to restore deterrence. And therefore, we have to show strength and we have to achieve a victory. What is victory? The goal enunciated by the government is probably politically modest, but military ambitious. We speak about eradication of Hamas military capabilities. We have to be aware that Hamas is also an idea, extremist Islamist idea, that is not going to die easily. And after we dismantle all their military capabilities, after we apprehend their leadership, after we kill many of their soldiers, in the future, we may see Hamas being born again. And I'll tell you why. 60%, according to a recent poll of September, 60% of the Palestinians are supporting Hamas. They have popular support. They were elected in a democratic election. So we should be very modest in assessing what we can achieve politically. We can destroy the military capabilities and get some quiet for some time. And this is something we should realize, that peace, as you and we understand it, will not necessarily follow the war. We'll continue to have mortal enemies. Of course, such a military goal requires a ground operation, which is going to be, as it was mentioned, lengthy and costly, and the people of Israel understand that. The people of Israel have the high motivation to go to war. Many are enlisted. They were mobilized as reservists. We've seen the great outpour of support from the civilians to the military. We've seen the long lines in foreign airports of Israelis trying to get home to fight. And this is the spirit. Actually, the spirit of Israel is the only light in this difficult situation we are in. We may face a multi-front war because Iran and its proxies have established military capabilities around Israel. The most famous is, of course, Hezbollah in the north. And they have actually already started a war, not very intensive yet, but they may join the fray in the future. Also, from Syria, from the Syrian border, where there are Shiite militias, we may see attacks with missiles. Also in the West Bank. In the West Bank, we apprehend almost every night Hamas activists. And the other organizations are not that friendly. Furthermore, we have another front. The Israeli Arabs, which most of them are law-abiding citizens, but enough numbers, a few thousand, could cause great trouble to Israel. They can block roads, they can block access to military bases, they can attack Israeli citizens, as we've seen 2 years ago. So all this is ahead of us, and this is why it is so important to win this war. And I want to point out to the Iran role. Iran and its proxies have a clear population-centric strategy. They want to strike at civilians, hoping that the Israelis will get discouraged and leave. They understand that conventionally they cannot win a war. And this is why we've seen those barbaric acts. Partly is well planned in advance to instill fear among the Israelis. And partly it's part of their political culture. And we understand it. By the way, it's quite clear the role of religion in this encounter. People in the West do not understand the role of religion in international affairs. And we have to understand that liberal values, aspiration for prosperity, are not necessarily the guiding principle for many people in our area. And I want to say a few words about the international arena. We get much support. America is behind us. But I'm not sure that their motives are entirely based on a pro-Israeli attitude. They have their own interests. They don't want an escalation, which might threaten American lives in the Middle East. And what probably is more important for this administration, the tacit Iranian-American nuclear deal. They don't want an escalation which will put Iran as an enemy. Hamas has been described as the enemy of humanity, but not its sponsor, Iran. Iran sending funds, Iran arms Hamas, Iran trains Hamas. But so far it is spared the rhetoric that is directed toward Hamas. despite the fact that probably this attack was fully coordinated with Hezbollah and Hamas and Iran. So the Americans don't want escalation because they are busy also with Ukraine. And of course, we appreciate the help, but also we are worried, and we see already signs of American pressure to do things which we don't want to do, and I am very much afraid that what we call the political clock is ticking. We have a certain time, and when we see not very nice pictures coming out of Gaza, the American may say enough is enough and will not allow us to complete the mission. So the American support has its drawbacks, and we should be aware of it. Israel has no intention of staying in Gaza after it conquers it. And probably this is not the last round. Hamas or another terrorist organization based upon the hatred, the visceral hatred of Palestinians against Jews and Israel will come back and will have to probably to mow the grass again. We should be very realistic in our expectations of what we can achieve in this war. Maybe a respite of several years, which will cement Israel's relation with the moderate Arab countries, which will weaken the influence of Iran, which will weaken the influence of China in the region. Only an attack on Iran will weaken the effect of the revisionist powers in the Middle East. And I think I took more than 10 minutes. So Meena, I give the gavel back to you.
Thank you so much, Professor Efraim, for expressing your views. And I think the most important point which you highlighted from my point of view is, it is not easy to destroy the idea and the ideology. And I think it is very important for the international community and everyone to understand the ideology, is something which is ingrained, in these terrorists' mind and people, the younger people, who are brainwashed. And there is no better future for them. And but my worry is, what is the future after war, actually, and I think that is a big question. Is there any possibility of coexistence? How do you, you have to live with the problem forever. Is that a solution? I don't know. But I think, even for the international community, it is important to understand, when you see the humanitarian crisis unfolding, the views start changing, on the outcome of the war. That is also a very, very important element of any war, for that example, I think. And the geopolitical dimension, General Khandare spoke of who would gain and who would lose. But I think in any war, every party is in many ways, they have to, they lose many things. But anyway, but the other important point is the spirit of Israeli people. And I think that is the light which all of you have. And probably that is making you going, and standing tall, even, in the situation where you are surrounded by such a hostile environment. And I think I'll pass on now I would request Professor Hillel, you to express your views and then to 10 to 12 minutes, and then we'll come back for other views that we're waiting for. Over to you, Professor.
Okay, I'll begin with saying that I object to the title of this seminar in relation to what happened in Israel. Terrorism, the word terrorism and the phenomena of terrorism is known to all democratic countries and to advanced democratic countries as well. And it's all something that in the past 50 years, they've been able to live with. In other words, the United States, after that great event of 9/11, which everyone described as a watershed, it turned out that America prospered afterwards. I mean, the stock market rose like never before. After that attack, the United States retained its preeminence. This is exactly not what happened in this watershed event. In this watershed event, Israelis started understanding, or those who didn't understand, we understood at JISS, but many Israelis didn't understand, including Netanyahu and most of the military brass, that we can no longer live with Hezbollah and Hamas. These are non-state organizations that threaten the national security of Israel, as did the major Arab states in the 50s and 60s. We can no longer live with them. I just want to remind you that 1,350 Israelis were killed in one day, in 24 hours. That is the equivalent of 190,000 Indians. 190,000 Indians who would be killed, let's say, God forbid, by a Chinese attack. No one in India would think after such an attack that you can live, that you can contain this problem. So, and ostensibly, even this watershed event you would think might not have threatened Israeli national security, because within 36 hours, Hamas was forced to evacuate from these settlements, and there was no territorial gain. But it's clear, every Israeli knows, that if we don't defeat Hamas, the people, the residents of the areas bordering Gaza will never return. They will never have the trust in the state to return. And we, for the first time in 100 years of fighting the Arabs and the Palestinians, and more broadly maybe the Muslim world, we will lose territory. So therefore, that's one holy cow that was destroyed. The ambassador spoke about it. The paradigm of containment, that we can live side by side with these two organizations, and just basically deny or elongate the peace between the wars. There was another paradigm in addition to containment, which was containment involved both Hezbollah and Hamas. There was another paradigm that was killed along with the many victims of those killed on October 7th. In 2018, Netanyahu, backed by almost all the military brass, backed by also the left-wing politicians who wished to destroy him, they all accepted this idea that you can tame Hamas through Qatari dollars, through opening up the workers' market in Israel to Gaza workers, by enabling Hamas leaders to go to Qatar. Qatar is Hamas, and Hamas is Qatar. Qatar is the closest ally, even closer than Iran to Hamas. And we all thought that if they remained for a long time in six star hotels in Qatar, not 5-star hotels, in 6-star hotels, we would be able to buy them off. We would be able to change their nature. They'll become responsible leaders. This became the governing concept of Netanyahu and almost everyone around him and in opposition to him. There was only one minister that opposed that. That was the Minister of Defense, and he resigned. He resigned on November 2018 when this strategy was adopted. So so both of these paradigms basically were destroyed. What is at the root of both of these paradigms? At root of both of these paradigms was moral decay. Moral decay. The belief of the Israeli elite that Israeli society has grown soft from being in coffee shops, in being on the front line of the internet, of the technological revolution, in the good life, that the Israeli public was no longer able to sustain losses, and therefore you have to avoid wars almost at any cost. This is at root. This is the root of these two flawed paradigms. One, the containment, and the other, the idea of the taming. It's not that this is what led to this conceptia, this groupthink. Of course, strategically, Israel should be attacking Hezbollah first. Why attacking Hezbollah first? Because Hezbollah is much more dangerous than Hamas. So the Americans brought in their aircraft carrier in the hope that, in the Israeli hope, that there'll be a two-stage war instead of a two-front war. But the war against Hamas is going to be followed by a war against Hezbollah, if Israel is really to achieve its objectives. Israel, in bearing the containment strategy, has to make a major mental transition in its basic strategy of the past 2 and even 3 decades from a strategy that buys time between the bouts of war to initiating war. This is a difficult transition for an advanced democracy that enjoys life in cafes, shopping centers, international travel, research, and work. But avoiding war only makes matters worse. Facing enemies with increasing capabilities, ardor, and innovation. Innovation. This is what Hamas proved in this attack. Tremendous innovation. Something that once Israel had, and Israel has lost, and now our enemies have. And I'd like to end on an Indian point. I think something very relevant to India. Probably many Indians believe that in Kashmir, for example, Islamists can be contained, mollified, molded into the mores and ways of Indian democracy. Well, I would say from our tragic experience that take this with a grain of salt, if not with the sense of deadly peril. I'd like to leave you with what happened in Be'eri, a kibbutz called Be'eri. Remember Be'eri. The Hamas completely took over this kibbutz. For 12 hours, they slaughtered at will no forces came to aid the. I mean, this is going to be investigated how this possibly could have been, but that's the truth. I mean, 13-year-olds were walking into the kibbutz to steal things with their bicycles, unbelievable. And these were all videos taken by the terrorists, by the Hamas terrorists themselves. There was one thing that was completely unscathed in Be'eri. What was that? It was one of the most advanced printing press plants in Israel that employs 400 people and is located in a very sophisticated glass tinted building. They didn't scratch that factory. They didn't touch it to prove the point of how wrong that paradigm of taming Hamas is. They were after slaughter. They could have just opened the door and stolen the computer equipment. There was computer equipment of millions of dollars. They didn't even open the door. It's unbelievable. And you can't fail seeing it because they were after slaughter. They were after the destruction of Israel, the destruction of democracy. I thank Lieutenant General Khandare for the international implications of this. The fight against Hamas and Hezbollah has to do with the democratic alliance against the totalitarian revisionists. I know many Indians don't like to hear this because they have a warm feeling towards Soviet Union and maybe Russia today. Well, it's not true. The real fight is between the forces of good and the forces of evil, the democratic forces versus totalitarian forces. And what happened in Israel on October 8th is just a small part of that story. A great tragedy for us, but a small part of that story. But it's that story that is so important for all of us to learn.
Thank you so much, Professor Hillel Frisch. I really appreciate your viewpoints and a couple of things that you really pointed out, that it is not going to be easy. The Israelis can't live with Hamas and Hezbollah. I do understand that. And I think the two paradigms that you spoke about, the paradigm of containment and the paradigm of actually taming the terrorists like Hamas and other groups, it is not. There is no taming. You can't buy them actually, because it is people who are driven by ideology are the most difficult people to deal with. And I also, agree that, when you have a situation like this, I mean, Hamas did come up with a very innovative ways of, inflicting terror and, violence on the people of the kibbutz that even we've been watching. And exactly, we do need the forces, or the democratic forces, to work together to fight the terrorists. And I'm sure if we have time, we would have little more discussions and few more questions, if it is possible. But I would now request our, in-house expert, Dr. Khushnam, to give his viewpoint. And over to you, Khushnam.
Good afternoon, everyone. And thank you, Chair. So many things have already been said about the event. I just would like to say, to begin with, that I agree with His Excellency Ambassador Naor Gilon that it is not a mere skirmish. And the Lieutenant General Vinod Khandare is very right to try to understand geopolitically who is going to gain out of it. And the Professor Efraim Inbar has said, while the Americans have come with their warships and the strike groups, but they have their own geopolitical interests and limitations, how long they will go with Israel. And with this, I just would like to go to see the things in the regional and global geopolitical perspective. To understand that, I would like to speak first about the whole region of West Asia has always been geopolitically the center of the world. And the power of the world powers decided how much share they have in West Asia. From this point of view, I would like to say first, the region is divided into three important regional actors. Broadly, the Arab world, led by mainly in the contemporary time by Saudi Arabia, and Iran and Israel. Out of that three, Israel is the most powerful one. And in this, the external players also always play the role. And these three always have a dynamic role with all the outside external actors. And they are United States of America, Russia, China, and of late, India. So all these play very important role in that. I would like to say that the United States has been the security guarantor after the Britishers withdraw from this region in 1971. And then they have a fifth fleet there. And Qatar is the forward headquarter of the CENTCOM. Likewise, later on, Russia has also again started having the two bases, Tartus Naval Base in Syria and Latakia Air Base in Syria itself. And then China does not have directly the military installation there, but they have in and around. It is Djibouti, the largest of the Chinese overseas naval base. And then they have ports and they have the convenience of taking their ships there. They are Gwadar in Pakistan, Dokam in Oman, and then Chahbar in Iran. And they have some kind of convenience in Bandar Jask and Qasem Island. So these all are some of the important factors if you see that how they are playing out and how this has led to this present crisis. And India is also very extensively, with the coming of Prime Minister Modi, we have dense diplomatic outreach and engagement, both economic and political, and extended neighborhood policy has played out. We have 10 million plus diaspora. Our Prime Minister first time visited, Indian Prime Minister visited Israel as well as Ramallah separately. And then we have very important strategic partnership with Israel, UAE, Saudi Arabia. And with UAE, we have the comprehensive economic partnership agreement as well. So all these factors keep in the mind. Then we try to understand what exactly is happening in this region for some time that has led to the present crisis. So in that, I'll take you back little geopolitically in the 70s, a little beyond. After the World War II, during the Cold War, the Soviet Union was in the side of the pan-Arab countries, basically the Syria, the Egypt, and part of it they were supporting the Jordanians also. And USA was having the two-pillar policy mainly that time, and the two pillar were the Saudi Arabia and Iran. And plus they were supporting the Israelis. And then when the British withdrawal happened, and during that time in the 70s, early 70s, Americans were constrained by the Vietnam War, and then Nixon doctrine was brought in. The President Nixon came to Tehran and he talked to the Shah of Iran, who was the very good friend of USA, that how the regional players will take care of the regional conflicts and the problems and issues, and they will be the stabilizer and they play the role of the US interest, secure the US interest in the region. And in that time, that Israel was also going very well with Iran. And then the Israeli policy of periphery doctrine, in which they were trying to start having the strategic partnership with all the non-Arab and the pro-West and pro-US regimes and the countries in the region, in that Iran was coming up very important. So that was going on. And then came the war, 67 war and 73 war. After the major powers, which are being supported by Soviet Union, was no more important. And the power in the Arab world shifted towards the Gulf. In that scenario, then the major event happened, the Iranian Revolution, and that changed completely the geopolitics of the region. And after that, Iran became a very important factor, and the slogan of the revolutionary Iran, the death to America, death to Israel, and death to the Arab Sheikdoms, and export of the revolution to the region, become the very important factor. And another important assertion of revolutionary Iran, was exclusion of the foreign powers from the region and support of the international Islam. There comes the Palestine question. And then they started supporting all the non-state actors which were supporting the Palestinian question. And then comes Hamas, which started in 1987, and the Islamic Jihad of Palestine, which had already started in 1981. So in this scenario, if you see that all the important actors, then will come how the Iran has come face to face and completely opposed to the Israel in the region, geopolitically. The Americans did not like to lose completely, because Iran, if you see Iran, strategically, it is studying the entire eastern flank of the Gulf. It is a very important country from the strategic point of view. So they came up with, in 2015, JCPOA. And the 3 years, they tried to manage Iran so that they can shift towards Indo-Pacific, which they were trying to do. And they want to draw down from there, and they're going to that side. And that time, JCPOA was completely opposed by Israel and the Arab worlds, because they were having the shared threat perception from Iran. And finally, when it was withdrawn, then the new things started coming up, new trends started coming up. We can say that Abraham Accord syndrome started. And that 2020, the Abraham Accord was signed. 2021, Israel was shifted from European command to the CENTCOM in the Gulf. And then the Biden visit, first time, the airspace of the Arab states was open for a plane coming from Israel. And then there was a talk of integrated air defense system between the Arab countries, the US partners in the Arab countries and Israel. So these all were being seen by Iran as a complete anti-Iranian. And in that, the Iranian started getting closer to China and Russia. And because China and Russia was also opposed to the Americans globally. So they started coming up. 2019, they came up with the joint military exercise in the Northern Arabian Sea and the Gulf of Oman. And from then, every year they are conducting that exercise. 2021, Iran-China signed 25 years of partnership with $400 million of investment by China in Iran. And then we have seen the Putin's visit to Iran the same time when Biden was visiting Saudi Arabia last year, when the war is going on in Ukraine. So these all things, it can be seen that how the situation is playing out. That in that scenario, during the Ukraine war, the last year, the NATO strategic concept declared Russia as an adversary and China for the first time as a strategic, systemic challenge. China was declared a systemic challenge and Russia was, and then the two started closing. And the US tried to, and the NATO as a whole, tried to expand its influence in the Indo-Pacific. In that scenario, then the Russians and the Chinese started getting closer and closer. And the idea, for the first time, all the Indo-Pacific partners, that is Australia, New Zealand, Japan, and South Korea, participated in the Madrid session of the NATO.
Khushnam,
that was the point. And then the
ask,
second region, yes.
Khushnam, can I ask you to wind up so that there's little time for the panelists to?
All right. So I'll just try to understand. I'll tell you that globally, the three important powers, besides the three powers in the region, USA, China, and Russia, there is a triangle of all the fight is going on. In that now 1972 onward, China was detached from Soviet Union, which has led to the collapse and the disintegration of Soviet Union. But now again, the China and Russia has come together and their interests are getting aligned. So in this, I will just try to see in this region, first was the Abraham Accord in 2020. And then it was completely, you can say, challenged and rather brought the new things, trilateral of Iran, Saudi Arabia, and China. It was a counter for them. And then came the Saudi Arabia and Israel normalization should be seen in that context, the geopolitical context of the region as well as the global geopolitics. It was brought, and then in that series, we see the Hamas attack on Israel. So in this scenario, now I would like to say, given this situation, that what is the way forward? Who gains from it? And how to stabilize the situation? Because in the globalized world and the regional security framework, the threats spread and travel faster, and it can spill over in the region and the larger world. So in that, I would like to say that immediate de-escalations, perhaps, and if all the parties agrees, Israel and Arab states, though Arab partners, can have the rationalized view, and the Arab states who are there, the party, Israel's friend in the Abraham Accord, and as well as they have the relationship with Iran, which has been established recently, can use that leverage and can contain and calm the situation so that the situation in the region can be stabilized and security for the time being can be restored. And then the way forward can be a viable solution of the Palestine question also. Thank you.
Thank you, Khushnam, for your views. And I think we have to end this discussion by 12:30. So just few comments, and I'll go back to the panelists for a very short comment that they may like to give. I think the discussion did revolve around, 3-4 dimensions. First was the geopolitics, and I think any conflict, any crisis, even the developmental issues have to look at the geopolitical dimension of it. The second aspect that we discussed was on the military aspects of it. What are the myths? I mean, how do nations prepare themselves for the future course of such conflicts? And third, of course, is all about ideology and role of religion. Now, I think the third dimension is very, very critical here. And I would add the fourth dimension to it is also, the damage done to the collateral damage of such conflicts on the civilians, on the innocent people. Now, how do we deal with these complex issues is not an easy way out, but I'm sure, people have to rework on their national strategies. People have to rework on how, the developmental dimensions of the countries that are looking at. And there is also, a very, very important point which have been coming in various narratives is about the big power, small power syndromes and how the bigger nations, have used, their own power to ignore the very urgent issues which do matter. And how does one come up with the conflict management? I think the priority now, there are short-term, issues, there are medium-term, and there are long-term issues. And each nation has its own spirit of dealing with these issues. And I'm sure in years to come, there would be like-minded countries, the democracies, or the countries who are willing to be partner, to deal with such, I would call them a heinous crime, an act of terror, unprovoked one sometimes, have to be dealt very forcefully. That is one aspect of it. But the other aspect is, how do you control the collateral damage? What are the possibilities of this? There are many questions, which are raised when people see women and kids dying. That also once. But bilaterally, when we look at India-Israel cooperation, I think, if I have to look at the real strategic content, then India and Israel have been and are and will continue to be real strategic partners. So I don't know if anybody has a point of clarification, but I would like all the panelists to at least, give a short comment. What are we looking ahead? I mean, what is the short-term solution to the crisis that is unfolding today? If you have any views to share on this. I'll go in the reverse direction. Khushnam, you 1 minute, and then I go back to Professor Hillel, and then Professor Efraim, and then General Khandare. I go in the reverse direction. Just 1 minute for you.
Thank you. Thank you. I will continue the same. I think I just wanted to tell that any region and the regional security is dependent on the fact that security of one state in the region is completely integrated with the security of other states. And here is a problem of the non-state actor as well. So in this scenario, now I have already told about the three important actors, geopolitical actors in the region is Israel, Iran, and the Arab world, basically led by Saudi Arabia. So in that, I would like, in the short term, they must have a de-escalation with the three, because the channels must be used, because Israel is having the convenience of talking to the Abraham Accord partners, and whatever gains they have made with the Abraham Accord must not be wasted, rather it should be enhanced so that it can play as a role of leverage, and they can bring and the Abraham Accord partners, basically Saudi Arabia, which has resumed the diplomatic relationship with Iran, it can be used to calm down all the actors and short-term.
We have other three people, so maybe quick.
Yes. So that is the only point I would like to tell, that regional powers should play the important role in these three, and must be in top. And so that it can be, the long-term solution can be found out. Thank you.
Thank you, Khushnam. Thank you. Professor Hillel, first you, if you have any comments, please.
Yeah, completely disagree with both of you. Israel is facing a national security crisis. It has to protect itself, and there's absolutely very little that we can do about Gaza or collateral damage. These are as unimportant as when Britain faced its darkest hour and sometimes had to bomb Dresden to bits and pieces, or when the United States dropped the atomic bomb on Nagasaki. There are moments in a nation's history where only their survival is of importance. And that's where we are.
Thank you. Professor Efraim.
I think that it's quite clear to me and most Israelis that we have to show strength. And as it was mentioned, war is not a non-option anymore. And we have to prepare much more seriously for future war with some of our neighbors.
Okay, thank you. General Khandare, quick comments.
I want to firstly, I understand what Professor Hillel is saying. Wars are costly business. When a nation decides to go to war, and that's what the head of the state announced, that they're going to war. So obviously you have to think that they know what they're doing. And I think it is best left to the political leadership to give the kind of military directive. And I know General Herzi Halevi, he is a thorough professional. While the Israeli national sentiment must be full of anger, but as a military professional, I'm telling you, when the military goes in for operations, they go with a calm and cool mind. And it is not in the nature of any military to do damage to collaterally. So I think they will take due precautions. And if wars start, collateral damages take place. I think the initiative taken by Hamas has been the biggest mistake that they have done. And if any initiative has to come for a peace initiative, it will have to be from Hamas and the people who promote them. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, General Khandare. I don't know, what is the solution to this problem, but sometimes we only provide a symptomatic treatment of the problem. And Professor Hillel Frisch has raised a very important, and I do feel it, when you have a nation like, Israel, where the very question of survival is the most important aspect of it, then I guess, dealing with those problems would be, the approach would be very different. And I think that is what is, of course, acceptable. But, Professor, in the debates, there is always agreement and disagreement. There is also, understanding of the issues. But at the same time, it is equally important to see that, there is an international dimension to it. There is a dimension which people will misuse. And so those issues cannot be put on the back burner as well. This is what I feel, completely unbiased. Yes, we've also suffered too much, but India is a big country. It can absorb a lot. But when we are looking at, a country like Israel, which is being threatened, by the neighboring states, the equation is very, very different. And so would be the solutions of the problem. And war, at least revenge, war, rage, this is something which is not going to bring, I'm 100% sure, the peace that we are looking for. There is no peace. Peace is a very, very difficult, thing to achieve. But what is achievable is, something with which you can live and you don't have to live with fear. That is where I think the problem lies. I don't know, there are some issues and problems which don't have, the quick solutions. But anyway, this debate is never ending. And I wish that all our hostages, Israeli and the international hostages, they do get released. Some sense prevails, in those people, or if, those who are the spoilers, they put in some sense and, bring back the hostages. That would be one achievement at least. And I would, with this, I'm looking at the clock, we have to end. I would like to thank the ambassador, all the speakers on behalf of JISS and TIF. So thank you so much for coming up with your ideas, with your perceptions. And I think this is the debate which we promote. The title is one issue, which I think in future should be exchanged between the two institutes and finalized. But regardless of the title, I think each one of you did express the views that you wanted to, and I think that is a step forward. With that, I think, Manish, there is no time for anything. So thank you so much, all of you, and it is indeed pleasure seeing you online, and I hope we are able to manage the present crisis in a better way.
Thank you.